What's up YouTube? I'm back with another GTO related video, Game Theory Optimal Playing in Poker, aka GTO. And this one is titled I like big bets and I cannot lie. And we probably all like big bets, I mean who doesn't? But I'm gonna be talking mostly about overbets when I talk about big bets. So overbets, they have something like mysterious, almost mythical. I know these days they're a bit more common, but I think it used to be something that really takes people out of their comfort zone. They don't really know how to react. It's a good tool to put maximum pressure in very specific spots. And I think some of the online legends like Isildur, when he was rising through the ranks, he was known as this loose, aggressive player who used overbets a ton when people just weren't used to it. And there's another example. It's old school legend. I think he was already an old school legend when Isildur was just coming up. An online guy named Will Hasha. He was also putting on maximum pressure with those overbets, mostly on the river. So I think back then, these guys mostly use it from a exploitative point of view. They would bet big when your range is kind of capped and you don't really have good hands to call down with. So then you're entering this spot where villain or hero like Isildur or Will Hasha is betting 2x spot or whatever on the river, on a board where you just cannot have the nuts based on the run out or based on pre-flop ranges. So you have a strict bluff catcher and the better has a ton of stronger hands. So you're in a spot where the bet seems so big. You're like, I can't call down with this hand, but it's the best hand I have. But yeah, he just always has it or he just never has it. And you enter this leveling game. The guys who used to overbet like that, they were very good at the leveling game, very good at trying to figure out when villain would call them down, when he would always fold. Maybe you're in a heads-up match, he overbets a couple of times, you always make the fold, then you get irritated and you're ready to make a stand or you're gonna call down, but right now he has it, while in the previous examples of the overbet, he was always over bluffing or stuff like that. So that is, for me, the old school way of looking at overbets, and definitely has its merits if you want to be on top of that whole leveling game. That's a game I don't really want to play. I'm going to talk about overbets from a GTO point of view. Yes, even there they have some merits, and they will help you extract more EV at equilibrium, even when villain plays perfectly versus your overbets. And we are gonna look at this spot with our classic river example, our classic river toy game of a hero with a polarized range of nuts and air versus a villain with a range of strict bluff catchers. If this example doesn't ring a bell, maybe it's a good idea to check my first intro to GTO or whatever it was called video out. I'll put a link here or somewhere down below, or I haven't really figured it out yet, but it will be somewhere popping up and you can click on it. And if you're already familiar with the example, you don't really have to go back to the first video. So a couple of lessons from that first video was the first one is, which is in my opinion a good way to think about the polarized versus bluff catchers spot, is whenever the polarized player gets to bet his balanced range, he wins the full pot on average. But he doesn't always win the full pot because he doesn't always get to bet. So in our example in the previous video, we had hero betting his balanced range, but in order to stay balanced, he needed to check fold or give up with some of his bluffs. So whenever he bets, he wins the full pot on average, but sometimes he needed to give up and he doesn't win the full pot with these give ups, of course. So that's lesson number one. Keep this one in mind. I think it really simplifies the way you can think about the spot. So, and the second lesson is the bet size hero uses dictates the amount of bluffs he gets to bet. Our bet size dictates the pot odds villain gets on his call with his bluff catcher. So the bigger we bet, the more often the bluff catcher needs to work, the more often the bluff catcher needs to be right, the more often the bluff catcher needs to be up against the bluff in order for it to be a break-even bluff catcher. So if we increase our bet size, but we don't increase our bluffing frequency, then villains should just fold, as his bluff catchers don't break even, they lose money. So with a bigger bet comes a higher bluffing frequency. So the bigger hero bets, the more often he gets to bluff. So for the same amount of value combos, the bigger we bet, the more we get to bluff, the bigger part of our range we get to bet. I see, we're going somewhere with this. So slideshows, I'm not really good at those. Apparently, I already set all of this, but now we have it again, text-based. So let's look at the pot odds villain gets on his call. You can calculate it as follows by looking at the bet size hero uses, divided by the pot size at the start of the river plus 2 times the bet size. So for a pot size bet, villain gets 2-to-1 pot odds, or 33% of the time, or whatever, however you want to express it. So his bluff catches need to win 33% of the time in order to break even. Hero bets in such a way that we're at this break even point. So hero bets 66.666666% of the time with value and 33.33% of the time with bluffs. Now, if you look at the same spot where there's more money behind, so hero can bet 2 times spot, for example, we again calculate at the pot odds villain gets, and here we have 40%. So villain's bluff catches need to break even 40% of the time. So he gets worse odds on his call, so his bluff catch needs to work more often. So this allows villain to bet more often. So his betting range consists out of more bluffs. So now let's move on to just a simple example. And again, a reminder, when the polarized player gets to bet his balanced range, he wins the full pot on average. So by betting bigger, he allows himself to bet more often and increase the frequency with which he wins the full pot. For example, hero ends up at the river with a polarized range of 6 value combos, nut combos, and 6 pure bluff combos, 6 pure air hands. And again, we look at the pot of $100. So first we look at the pot sized bet, the example of my first intro to GTO video. So he bets 6 value combos and 3 bluff combos. So out of the 12 hands he has on the river, he bets 9, which means he gets to bet 75% of the time. He gets to win the full pot 75% of the time. And this leads to an EV of $75, which we also concluded in that previous video. Now compare this to a bet of 2 times pot. We calculated the bluff to value ratio. So hero gets to bet his same 6 value combos, but he gets to bet 4 bluff combos instead of 3. So he bets 10 out of his 12 combos that he ends up on the river with, which means he gets to win the full pot more. He wins the full pot 83.33% of the time, which leads to an EV of 83.33. So with the same ranges, just because there's more money behind, hero can leverage his range strength and capture at equilibrium a bigger share of the pot, and there is nothing villain can do about it with these ranges. So what do we do with this new knowledge? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that this is a toy game that doesn't occur like this in real poker. Sometimes people learn something from a toy game and they will start applying it everywhere, but keep in mind that real poker hands are different and more nuanced. So real hands are less polarized. So there will be no spot with nut combos with 100% equity and air with 0% equity versus a range of bluff catchers. No, the air hands or the bluff combos will have some equity to improve, and the bluff catchers probably will also have some equity to improve versus the nut combos. So keep in mind that real life is different, but there are still plenty of pretty capped spots where for all practical reasons villain is kind of capped. For example, villain opens the button, we flatten the big blind. The flop is a check 5 flush draw board. Big blind we check, button checks back on this board. Now, some players might basically never check back trips there. And I'm not saying they should, I'm just saying when they check back, when they're at that part in the game tree, they're gonna be pretty capped. So let's say it's check 5, check back, a 3 turn. In this spot, when we're in the big blind, all of our Jack X hands are basically nuts, at least for practical reasons. Now the tree could have improved villain. Maybe button check back trips, or maybe he has some traps, but he also will have a big part of his range that is just a capped range of bluff catchers. So in spots like that where somebody checks back, I think we usually benefit from having some kind of overbetting range to really push our hands, to push our nuts combos, allows us to bluff more. But I think the easiest spot to start overbetting is on the river, sometimes based on pre-flop hand strength. Villain can never have the nuts. So let's say we open as the button, big blind flats, and we end up in some river spot where ace king is the nuts. Big blind would never flat ace king pre-flop, so we can have a overbetting the nuts part of our range consisting out of ace king with the appropriate amount of bluffs, for example. Another example is where, because of the run out, villain can never have the nuts. This is usually a spot where, let's say, a turn gut shot or a flop gut shot hits on the river. The preflop caller who calls your continuation bet on flop and turn, he will never have that gut shot on the river because he would never check call twice with that gut shot. So you can find some spots like that where, based on the run out or based on preflop ranges, when you end up on the river, some player just does never have the nuts. So the other player could gain EV here in this river spot by having a big overbet with the nut combos and the appropriate amount of bluffs. So I have shown you that even at equilibrium, you gain EV by having big bets, by having overbets, but you can also just keep exploiting. If villain is kind of nitty and you just think he's not gonna call down often enough versus your overbet, just bluff more and value bet a bit more for a more regular size that you think gets called more often. Or the other way around, if you're up against the calling station, don't bother balancing your big bets, just bomb the pot, bet bigger than pot, and extract value that way. Yeah, I guess that's it for this video. Short-ish video, no new info for some of you, but I guess they wouldn't make it to the end, and hopefully very useful info for some others. I think the first video might have been a bit dry, but I think that classical river example is such a staple in poker theory that I hope this new video has showed you some applications of that classical spot. And yeah, I'll see you guys back in the next one. Happy holidays. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to stay up to date, hit the notifications to stay really up to date, and feel free to share this video with any of your friends that might enjoy it. This would really help me out a lot as a starting YouTube channel to gain some momentum. See you in the next one.